Hi everyone, today I'm talking about Merv, the Heart of the Silk Road. Now this is a 2020 release board game designed by Fabio Lopiano and with artwork by Ian O'Toole. This one accommodates 1 to 4 players and takes about 90 minutes to play. Before I start, I just want to mention how beautiful this box cover is. Probably one of the best box covers I've seen in a long time. These bright, vibrant colours with these white silhouettes just looks amazing. And Ian O'Toole is definitely just way above the curve in terms of board game art. He's just fantastic. So this one is, as I said, a Euro-style game that's going to be competed in terms of getting as many points as you can based on this track around the edge there. And it's one of those games, if you're familiar with them, where you have a series of mini games that kind of interlock with each other and can kind of synergize with each other in one way or another. So the main part of the game is taking place on this central area here, which is, I suppose, a map of Merv, and all these different tiles are randomly allocated at the start of the game. And these tiles have different information on them. So first off, they have the action that you can take, and they all kind of correspond to a different mini game. So for example, this one here corresponds to this area down here. And they also dictate the resource you're going to get if you go to that spot. So what I mean by that is a turn is going to look like this. So you're going to move your player piece to any one of these 5 spots, depending on the round. So you're going to start off by going on this top area, then you're going to go down here in the second turn, third turn, and then fourth turn until you're back here, ready to go again. And that's going to basically happen 3 times. So yeah, as I said, you're going to pick one of these slots. So let's say I go here, for example, and then I'm going to choose any one of these buildings in this column. So let's say I pick this one here. So I'd pick, if there's nobody on it so far, I'd put my house on there, and I would take the depicted resource. So for example here, I'll take one of these coloured cubes. Now, as the game carries on, you might end up building more and more houses on a certain column. So say I built this one as well. And say I came back around to here and chose this column again, then not only would I get this cube, I'd also get the orange cube as well. So you can really kind of compound your resources that you're going to get by building in certain rows or columns. Now, additionally, when obviously other players are doing the same thing at the same time. So let's say the black player starts putting these down here. When it comes back to my turn, back around here, then I obviously have the option of either choosing my own building, or I can now choose the black building as well, where I would get all the resources, but my opponent would also get a resource of the building I chose. So they would, for example, get if I chose this building, I would get both of the resources, and my opponent would get, or the black opponent would get, that resource. So, you aren't restricted to only buying or taking from the buildings that you place. And as the game develops, as you can probably imagine, the board gets more and more full of different resources, which can potentially be destroyed a bit later, as I'll explain shortly. But let's talk about all the different actions that you can actually take. So there are a number of different actions here. So the first of which is, well, let's go around in order. So you've got the kind of resource one here, where you are buying these either rare or common goods. So you've got the common goods here, and you've got the rare goods. And what you're going to do if you take this action is you're going to put one of your discs on one of these spots closest to Merv. So you can start in Merv, and then you can, for example, if I went here in Samarkand, I would not only get this camel, which is another resource I'll explain shortly, but then I'd have the option to cash in an orange cube in order to get one of these fruits. Additionally, for every camel I spend, I can make a trail from where my disc is or from where Merv is in order to take that action. So I could, for example, take, if I put a camel here, I could take this action by cashing in these 2 cubes to get a rare good. And the reason I want to collect these goods is for a number of contracts. So anytime as a bonus action, you can fulfill one of these contracts, varying in difficulty. So starting off from the very easy ones, which just take a couple of these scrolls and any resource to get this many points. And the quicker you are to do it, the more points you're going to get, because these, as you can see, the points values depreciate as the game goes on. But these aren't only subject to that restriction, because basically you see they've got a point value here. That dictates how far you need to be on this track up here in order to fulfill them in the first place. So for example, I need to be here before I can fulfill any of those value 1 contracts, or here before I can fulfill any of those value 2 contracts, and so on. So that's going to be how this one works. Then any spare camels or any camels that you spent are going to end up going on the card row here which again I'll explain shortly. So the other action you can take is the scroll one, which is pretty straightforward, where you're cashing in cubes or different coloured cubes in order to get a number of different scrolls. So for example, 1 cube is going to get you 1 scroll, 2 cubes are going to get you 2 scrolls, 3 scrolls, 3 cubes, 3 scrolls, and so on, but they all have to be different. And the reason for those scrolls is not only for the contracts, as I mentioned before, but also because you can take these bonuses by having a certain amount of contracts. So if you have 2 contracts, you can take one of these bonuses, which means that whenever you take the respective action, you get to pay 1 cube fewer. If you take this, once you get 4 scrolls, you can take these bonuses, which means that you can start using cubes as kind of wilds. If you get 6, you can start getting these instant bonuses. And again, if you get 8, you get these particularly powerful bonuses where you can get a lot of points or a lot of powerful abilities. Next up, we've got this action down here, the Palace, where you are going to basically invest in, well, your options to get points. So what you're going to do is, for the first worker you place, by spending a cube of the respective colour, you are going to put one of your workers on that slot and potentially get one of these tokens or symbols, which let you move up this track and hopefully get you more points as you go up. But they also unlock scoring opportunities in the scoring phases. So for example, for every worker you have here, you're going to get a point for every scroll you have, or a point for every card you have, a point for every resource you have, or a point for every place you are up on this track over here, which again, I'll explain shortly. Let's talk about this track while we're here. So this track, you are going to basically follow the path. So first off, you're going to cash in cubes, and you can go as far as you want at any time, as long as you can afford it. So if I spent one of these cubes, I'll go there and get myself a camel. Then I could spend another orange cube and go here and get myself one of these tokens. And these tokens, white tokens that is, are good because they are wild, and you can put them on one of your buildings or any other player's buildings. So for example, if I put it on here, that would now produce white cubes, which means that it's a wild and gives me a lot more options going forward. And again, you can keep going up, again, moving up the track, getting these additional resource gatherers. So again, you can put them on your buildings, which again means that when you take that action, you're going to get an additional orange cube. And so on. So you can protect your buildings, which means they're not going to get destroyed, and so on. So you can get loads and loads of benefits as you go further and further up this track, and potentially get a lot of points. Second, or penultimately, we've got the card track here, and these card tracks is pretty simple. I suppose it works as a pretty simple set collection game, where if you have spices of different types, you can get a potential of 10 points per set, but obviously fewer points than that if you have less to the set. But you can pick up cards, any card with a camel on it, or the next card next to a camel. And the reason you might want to do that is because for every pair of identical cards you get, you're going to get a bonus. So for example, if I have 2 of these cards, I'm going to get a white cube. And again, if I have 4 of them, I'm going to get another white cube, and so on. So that's going to be why you're going to want to accumulate cards. But also, if you invest in the card slots here, then you're going to get more points that way as well. And additionally, the set collection points at the end of the game. Now, if you want to go particularly farther on the track because you want a particular card, not in this setup, but you can always place a camel on the card to take the next one and keep going until you run out of camels. But whenever you do draft a card with a camel on it, you are going to get that camel. And something I should say as well is that this track not only dictates which contracts you can get, but it dictates how many different cards you can have. So for example, in this one, as soon as I get to this point in the track, I can collect 2 different types of cards, or 3 different types of cards, or 4 different types of cards. So once you commit to picking up a certain type of card, then you are stuck with it until you get further up on this track. And as you get further and further up it, you're going to get the potential to get points as well. And the final aspect of the game is this wall logo here. So whenever you take an action with this wall symbol, let's say like this one, for example. So if you take this action, then you're going to get to purchase a piece of wall. And as you can see, they start off cheaper, just costing 1 coin each, 1 cube each, but eventually getting more and more expensive. The gates being even more expensive. But once you buy one, or as many as you can afford, you can put these walls onto the board. So say, for example, I put one say I pay 3 cubes to get a gate. I could put the gate on the gate symbol here, which ultimately protects my buildings from being smashed at the end of the second and third round. Because as you can see, the first round, there's not going to be a Mongol invasion. In the second round, there is going to be one, and again in the third round. And now what that means is that from every direction on the board, the Mongols are going to attack, which is just a simulation really, that says that any building not protected by walls is going to be lost unless you pay a ransom of the matching colour. So, you've got to be wary of protecting your best buildings by these walls, and because they get attacked in 2 different directions in a lot of the cases. So, let's say this one is going to get attacked from this direction and this direction because they only go 2 in. You would have to protect it, otherwise you're going to lose it. And for every building that you protect, you end up getting influence points, which can take you further up these tracks here. And that's going to be basically how the game's going to play until the 3 rounds are over. So once you've got three rotations of this grid, then it's going to conclude, and all your points are going to be tallied based on, again, the palaces, based on how many cards you have, and so on. So that's going to be how the game's going to work itself. There's also quite an interesting order mechanic where whoever kind of gets, let's say, all the pieces are placed like this, whoever's furthest behind on that order goes into the last spot, but you can pay a camel for each spot that you're behind in order to shimmy up player order. So you could do like so, paying 2 camels to move up that order, and then the next player would go here, being able to either pay a camel again in order to shuffle up into that second position, and then the last player could go into the last position but collect all the camels that were left there. So you've got quite an interesting order mechanism there as well. So that's going to be how the game's going to work and how it's going to play. So let's talk about all the kind of different decisions here, because as you can see, there is a lot going on. And not only have you got to rack up about which row and column you're going to use, but also which action you're going to use as well. And of course, you're not always going to use your own buildings, because sometimes players will leave quite nice opportunities for you to grab. But of course, you've got to be wary that you're going to give your opponent resources by using their buildings. Additionally, if they have these bonus tokens on their own buildings, they're also going to get those resources in addition to the building you've selected. So you've got to weigh up the fact that not only do I want these resources, but I also need an action on that row or column. So there is a lot to think about even in the initial kind of phase of the game. But then from there, you've got all the different routes that you can take. So, are you going to gather those resources there and go for the contracts? Are you going to focus on getting these scrolls and getting these powers? And they have kind of duplicate abilities as well, because when you actually do fulfill them on the contracts, those scrolls aren't actually spent, so they can still be used in terms of getting these powers. Are you going to really invest in your ability to score points based on all the different criteria, or going to completely stockpile on one of those criteria in order to get as many points as you can? Are you going to really focus on this track here and get all the different bonuses, potentially getting more points by unlocking this token here, which gets you 3 points for each of the certain type of building that you've selected? Are you going to try and protect all your buildings and get points that way, or fly up this track and get lots of different card types? So there are lots of different routes and options you can go down, and I think ultimately you're going to have to dabble in everything, but you can focus on a couple of things. And something I really like as well is that you can get quite a lot of mileage out of your actions, because when you take any action, you can pretty much exhaust your cubes by taking that action as much as you want. So just because I take a wall action doesn't mean I can only buy one piece of wall. I can buy as many pieces of wall as I can afford, which means that you're getting quite a bit done on your turn if you have the resources for it. So I really do like that aspect of the game, and it feels like you can get quite a lot done with a single turn. So yeah, in terms of different options and decisions you can make, it's very good. Lots of things you can try, and everything's important, and you're going to get points in a lot of different ways. All of these different routes as well seem like a good option to go down. There's no particular path that I think is better than others. Of course, you can, as I said, invest in certain paths more than others if you wanted to. But again, everything seems proportionately balanced. The time investment of the game, I think, is really good. I mean, you can definitely get this played in the time frame said on the box. 90 minutes is about right for this one. And ultimately, only the 3 rounds is, it's pretty snappy because, like I said, you only go around that board, in 4 different areas each turn. So, yeah, it's a pretty snappy game, and before you know it, the time is drifting away with you. And uptime as well. All the decisions, all the mini games are pretty straightforward. So once you've selected your row and column and taken the action, then actually taking that action isn't going to be too paralysing. Replayability is, you've got obviously all this grid is set up in a completely different order each time, and that's going to completely change the game. But additionally, you can choose to focus on different things if you really want to and go for a different approach. And sometimes you're going to have to based on the spots that are taken, because you can't keep doing the same action because somebody might be on that row or column, and you can't share that spot with somebody else. So you've got to be wary of that. And in that respect, the interaction is pretty damn good, mainly because of this, as I said, this grid. Because as I said, you can take spots that other people want, and ultimately stop them from having it. So there is a bit of turn angst in trying to not only get the rows and columns you want, but also be first player in order to get what you want going forward as well. Additionally, there are limited segments of walls and stuff, so you can't have everything at once. So you do have to be wary of what other players are doing, but not in a way that's completely destructive or anything like that. Aesthetically, I think the game looks wonderful. I love this bright, vibrant colour scheme. I think it works really well for the game and the theme of the game, the setting of the game. So yeah, I think it's very attractive, and not to hark on about at all, but he's just probably the best artist out there at the moment. Just makes stunning games and game boards. And the theme as well, it's a nice setting, this kind of hustle and bustle Indian market. It works really well for the theme and the kind of what you're doing. So yeah, no complaints with the theme and the kind of skin on the game at all. Setup and teardown time is no issue. I mean, you've got no player boards or anything to fuss around with, so it really is just setting up that main board that's the main faff. But other than that, it's pretty quick, to be honest. And in terms of progression, I really do like the way that as the game goes on, you're putting more and more buildings down onto that grid and getting more and more resources per turn. Additionally, as I said, you can get so much mileage out of your turns by having pools of resources, and it does feel like you're doing more and more as the game goes on, getting further up these tracks and so on. So yeah, no complaints there. Scalability works absolutely fine. In a 2-player game, there is a dummy piece, which the person in first moves the spot is going on, and then the second player is going to choose which building it goes on. So there is a kind of a proxy piece that you can still use as it was a real player, with very little upkeep. So that works well, and it kind of tightens the game a bit. And comparisons, well, there are quite a few of these games that have these almost mini games within a game. As I said, you've got all the different options you can take, all corresponding to a core mechanism. So I think if you're familiar with games like Trajan or games like maybe Gugong, then this is one that might appeal to you because of that, of the fact that it is that mini games within a bigger game framework. So in that respect, it is similar to them, but it still plays very differently. But that one idea of a game within games, it has familiarities to those other titles. So overall, I've been hearing a lot of buzz about this game, and I can certainly see why. It plays very well, nice and smooth, lots of interesting decisions throughout. Obviously, a stunningly beautiful game as well, and I think Fabio Lopiano is really a designer to look out for, because I think he's relatively, he hasn't made too many titles, but everything he's bringing out now is certainly going to pique my interest, because he's made some, he's starting to make some waves. And I think Merv is going to be the catalyst for that, really, because this is a rock solid game. I've really enjoyed it. I'm certainly going to play it quite a few more times. I love the way you gather resources. I like the way that you have to protect your buildings, and you don't have a lot of time to do so as well. So it has a nice time restriction. You can't get everything done, but you can still have a fair go at everything. And ultimately, it's a very satisfying game that was a lot of fun, and also, I can't really find any complaint with it either. So if this appeals to you, then I think you're going to like it. But, if not, obviously not. But no complaints about this one. I really enjoyed it. A rock solid Euro, and certainly one of the best titles of the year. Yeah, just a rock solid game. So that is Merv by Fabio Lopiano. Certainly gets my seal of quality. Just a really enjoyable game. So if you have enjoyed this review, please hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos too. For everyone else, you can check me out on Instagram or back me on Patreon, and I'll leave the links below for those. And I'll see you next time. Bye.